We have a quorum?
We do. Because Aguilar's on that. Okay, are we ready? Let's pretend.
Yeah.
We're good? Oh, good. Let's call this meeting to order, a special board meeting of the Salton Sea Authority, Friday, May 23rd, 2025, 9 a.m. at the fabulous Cambria Imperial Hotel. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will have Mrs. Hamby lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. She doesn't know it, but
we find a flag.
where is it?
I know.
Just pretend.
Oh, okay.
To the north?
Yeah.
Yeah. Calipat's flag is that way.
Yes, ma'am. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and
to
to
the
the
republic.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will have roll call from clerk of the board. Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. President Dockstader,
Present.
Vice President Estrada, Secretary Gutierrez, Treasurer Kelly, Director Morales,
Here.
Director Aguilar, Director Singh,
Present.
Here, I'm here.
thank you,
Good morning.
Director Perez, Director Cardenas,
Present, good morning.
Ex-Officio Joshi.
Present.
Excellent. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam President, I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
And I think it's appropriate as presented.
Public comments? Do we have any public comments?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Any board member comments?
One comment, I'd just like to thank again Mr. Joe for his efforts yesterday, and just a class act in terms of just unveiling the success that's happening on the south end of the sea. So please pass on again our appreciation to our secretary, Secretary Wade Crowfoot, and also the work on the part of the Department of Water Resources.
Thank you. Thanks for making it happen.
That was a fabulous, I will add on to that, it was a fabulous event yesterday. It was great to see the water go into that east pond.
Here's in the making.
Yep.
That's right.
Online.
Are there any comments online? Thank you.
Not at this time.
Okay, items for discussion and possible board action, moving on to consent calendar. Is there any discussion about the consent calendar? I
have no questions or discussions, and would move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved to approve the consent calendar by Director Cardenas, and it has been seconded by Director Morales. Can we please have a roll call vote?
President Dockstader,
Aye.
Director Morales,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Yes,
Director Singh,
Yes.
Director Perez, Director Cardenas.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Yay. Moving on, Salton Sea Authority operating budget, review and approve. Does any,
Madam President, at our last board meeting, we presented in detail the 2025-2026 operating budget. The expenses do not change in any material sense from the previous year, with no exception. I would note that there are two revenue items on the budget that I highlighted last month that I'll repeat. One is partner support, the other is stakeholder support, which doesn't have any corresponding expenses associated with them. I just wanted to put them on there to telegraph that the authority is looking for partner support and stakeholder support in addition to the long-standing support of its member agencies in order to do the work that benefits everybody in the community and the region. We are continuing the discussions, but I'm sure that as the scopes of work are more clearly defined and the resources are responsibly identified, those funds will become available, and we will partner with all of the other people to make sure that, just like yesterday, we'll have more successes in the region. And with that, I would recommend approval of the 2025-2026 operating budget and direction to staff to send out the member input.
I have a couple questions because I started with going over it last night again. The $10,000 sponsorship, what was that again?
That is, we did that last year also, and it didn't show up on our financial statement, but what we do is when we have an event like
Right.
a tour,
Right.
we would have sponsors that would either contribute financially or otherwise, and.
And what we
understand-
do last year, was it like IID contributed something and somebody
Yeah,
else?
they
I'm
paid
just-
for, meals or
Food
stuff
and-
like
okay.
that, right? You
Mhm.
know, so
Mhm.
it didn't show up as cash coming in and going out of the
Mhm.
financial statements, but there are resources there that we use to do different things. I actually think that on a more programmatic basis, working together with other stakeholders and with a more refined and targeted program for outreach and engagement, there are even broader opportunities for this type of support. I know that the state can't fund certain things on their tours, that I think that working together with the state, we can find the resources to improve the experience of those types of events for the targeted participants.
And my next question, and I don't mean to throw Lisa under the bus, but the $15,000 extra in salaries, was that from Lisa's raise?
So the 15,000 extra in salaries reflects principally, we are Riverside County employees, and Riverside County has a collective bargaining agreement of sorts where the increases are programmatic. So the salaries that are in there simply reflect the programmatic agreements for the levels that Lisa and I reflect as Riverside County employees.
Okay.
And
And
no determination otherwise.
My other question was didn't I have fun last night when I was reading all this stuff again?
I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, audit and accounting, Janice, so she gets almost $1,400 a week. I don't know if she's listening, but my husband is not paying me enough. Is all of that, so basically $75,000 in the budget is going for
A part
her?
of it was budget expenses. You know, it's a time of the year when we're spending more time.
Uh-huh,
We're spending less with her than we did with our previous accountant, and I
okay.
expect her time to decrease.
And does she pay the bills? That was gonna be my next question. Does she physically pay the bills or does Lisa physically pay the bills?
So
You
So-
physically pay the bills.
QuickBook physically pays the bills.
Yeah, okay,
But we have a, board procedure for processing those bills.
Right.
Where Lisa inputs the invoices,
uh-huh,
Janice makes sure they're coded correctly. And then I approve them for payment subject to board member alignment.
I'm just flagging that. I just thought
I
that was a
appreciate
lot of money I'm telling you, I need a raise. And my last question was,
So if I could,
Yeah.
that is an area where we were put in an unanticipated position. We had Ike Bailey, and Ike Bailey determined they could no longer support us as a client. And so we had to in fairly short order, bring in resources.
uh-huh,
We are paying Janice less than we paid Ike Bailey,
uh-huh,
but I do think that it's something that, working with Janice and working with the member agencies and the board, we can identify how to best handle our financial operations.
uh-huh,
It may be appropriate, and it's something that, if we want to close out, we don't make another change in this fiscal year, but going forward in the next year, we may have a bookkeeper that handles the day-to-day operations and just someone who reviews it.
yeah,
So I think there are some opportunities for savings there,
okay,
but it is a situation where I don't think we're gonna break the budget. But it is a situation where we did have a bit of a hiccup that we didn't anticipate. And I think that that's reflected in some of the anomalous expenses that you're seeing.
and then my last question was the interest expense. What was that for?
Oh, I know what that's for. There's it's an ins and outs situation with Riverside County
Uh-huh,
on the payroll account. So it's a timing issue and it's a
Oh.
legacy problem
okay,
with that we have addressed with Janice. So we should have no interest expense going forward.
okay,
Sometimes the payroll account was funded in arrears, and we had an interest charge associated with that.
okay.
Right now, our payroll is funded through the end of the fiscal year.
All right, thank you,
I had
Patrick.
to think about it because
Those were all the questions I had regarding the budget, so. Does anybody else have any questions?
You took all the oxygen. out of the room.
Thorough enough for you? Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that, Madam Chair. Madam President.
Okay, so is that motion to approve then?
Yeah.
Thank you, the operating budget, and seconded by Director Cardenas. Can we have a roll call vote, Lisa?
President Dockstader,
Aye.
Director Morales,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
yes,
Director Singh,
Yes.
Director Cardenas.
Yes,
Motion passed.
Moving on to federal matters, Imperial Stream, Salton Sea and Tributaries Feasibility Study.
Madam President, as you know, we secured a feasibility study in the 2020 WRDA that we signed an agreement with the state and our federal partners in 2022. I've been working through the scoping process of this over the last couple of years and identified a requirement to complete the project of approximately $22.5 million, of which half is paid by the federal government and half is paid by the local sponsors, which includes the Department of Natural Resources and the Salton Sea Authority. But as part of the agreement with the state, we are indemnified from the cost associated with this from the state. So this will be a state's expense. But what we're looking for here is federal support for next year's cost associated with the effort. We understand that the Corps has included this in their work plan, but because of the situation in DC, we want to continue to lean on and work with our federal delegation. So this is in support of their request for the money. And I'd like Lisa Moore, our DC representative, to talk a little bit about the process and why this resolution is necessary and appropriate.
Okay, this is on the resolution. Yeah, sure. So, the most recently in the Corps' last work plan, we got $3.8 million, which was actually the most any study got at the end of the Biden administration. We expected that to carry us through FY26. We've been doing a number of calls with the Corps just on the project, and they indicated to us that they had what they call additional capability for FY26, meaning that they could, they still have resources for FY26, but based on, they've really picked up the pace of things. And so based on that, they said they could handle another 1.76 million for FY26. So we were actually, based on the earlier representations, a little bit sort of past the deadlines for federal appropriations process. So in order to get what used to be called an earmark, or Congress putting money specifically toward a project in its appropriations bills for FY26, you have to do a number of different things. All the members have just specific requirements for asking for resources. We quickly reached out to our Senate and House delegation to say, hey, is there any chance that you would take this request a little bit past the deadlines? And they both agreed to do that, which was quite generous. So I filed that paperwork. But one of the requirements when Congress brought earmarks back a few years ago were sort of letters or resolution of local, in particular, local support. The authority being an entity that represents, really the local stakeholders in the project. The way that we actually, when we've asked for appropriations in the past, we've done it via a resolution like this. So we did one kind of when we were going for the initial appropriation a bunch of years ago. So the resolution's intended to describe kind of what the history is on the project, what the federal interest is in the project, kind of where things, what the need is. And so that's what the resolution's intended to do, is to be able to kind of supplement the approps paperwork that I put in now a couple of weeks ago, I guess. So that is the purpose of it.
So when Lisa says they were quite generous, I think that's quite an understatement. I think that and it's reflective of the relationship that Lisa has and the authority has back in DC, and the importance of this effort to our federal delegation. They literally had to give us access to the portal in order to make the request, and so that was a significant concession or opportunity on their part.
It is an area where it is helpful when the state moves forward doing things like appropriations. I used to work in the California delegation in the Senate, right? They have to weigh all the different appropriations that they may be asking our delegation to submit, and that process takes a fair amount of time at the state level. So one of the things that we're able to do at the authority is, we learned of it on a phone call, and by that evening I had filed it with the Senate side, and the next day I had done it with the House side because, you were just able to move fast, also a little bit sort of faster. So,
So we had drafted an initial resolution, but recognized that we were in tenuous times, sensitive times, and wanted to be take care that what was contained in the resolution didn't affect all the other moving parts in and around the region. So we worked together with our member agencies, especially those associated with Colorado River, to craft a resolution that achieves our objective without creating unanticipated consequences, and that's what you have in your board packet today.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
I do appreciate the resolution. Just if I could make a couple suggestions. I know we are implying that we're working with the California delegation or our California delegation, but would there be any benefit, Ms. Moore, if we did share and highlight our relationship with the Torres Martinez tribe? I do see, again, it's a very effective resolution, but there's really no mention of our incredible relationship with Torres Martinez. And I'm just wondering if there would be value
Sure.
if we incorporated them into the resolution, because ultimately they were the catalyst that allowed us to provide testimony in the congressional hearing that we had several years.
So yeah, I think hopefully I put them as one of the members at the top, but absolutely, sure. Yeah, that was completely easy enough to do.
Yeah, I don't believe I saw it, but I know
It's in the
first-
first paragraph,
Okay.
but also if there could be a whereas that
I think it's worth
references.
highlighting. I think
Yeah.
I can do a where, yeah, absolutely. It's no problem to do that. Yeah, I wasn't saying that mentioning them at the top was sufficient. I just wanted to make sure that I had done it, because that would be a terrible oversight if I had left not actually put them in
And
the numbers.
if the board is amenable, we'll review it with the president and with Chair Morales to make sure that the additional language is acceptable before we issue the resolution.
And then one other edit, if I may, Madam Chair, into the member agencies. I know there is a whereas referencing the SSMP. However, the back end of that sentence but has yet to meet an annual requirement as required by the Water Board. And I'm not saying that's maybe not factual, but there's a lot of contributing factors maybe to that. Is there any way we can maybe soften that up a little bit? Or I just don't know if there is appetite from the agencies to consider an alternative to that. Again, what I've seen in the last 36 months with the efforts that are being made in terms of the SSMP, I just want to make sure that our federal partners know that they are, doing all they can in terms of meeting that water order. Any maybe wordsmithing that whereas where it is showing that they are making incredible efforts there. Maybe I'll ask Mr. O'Dowd and then maybe defer to Ms. Moore as far as softening up that language a little bit.
So this is something that we did, give some consideration to. The Fed, motivating the feds is bringing the federal government in as a partner is going to improve, as demonstrated by the most recent investment, is going to improve the work of the state. And I think highlighting this is only intended to recognize the fact that we need to work together on this. That is there some additional language that we can include to soften it up? I'm not a soft kind of guy, but I would invite Ms. Moore to see if her thoughts.
I'm sure. I'm sure I hear what you're saying. All it's intended to do, but I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely will work on that. It's to say, like, we're making progress, but there's still a lot to be done. So it's not kind of like, hey, the vibe back here before we really started making a push for federal resources was like, this is all the state of California's problem. Right. And so we're sort of trying to say the state's doing what it can, but we do really need these federal resources. But I will absolutely work on that.
Yeah, there's just the two words maybe that has yet, to meet the annual requirement. And again, the event the event we participated yesterday and the efforts that are being made. I just want them to know that they're not the super villain out here. And if we could maybe consider wordsmithing that, I think it would go a long way.
Sure. It was not intended to make them a villain.
Yeah, no problem.
But if it reads that way to you, then right, that's a it's not intended to do, it's not doing what it's intended to do, so I'll work on that.
Thank you so much.
Maybe one suggestion, Lisa, would be to characterize the work that the state is doing in the context of our 10-year plan, but also acknowledge that we've got this larger, restoration effort of the sea itself that we're working to advance, and we see our work with the Corps as part of that process. So some sort of nod to the state doing, to Director Cardenas's point, what it can around the early implementation of projects, but then acknowledge, there's this much larger issue we're trying to address, which is why we need the federal partnership. I feel like that's how our conversations with the Corps to date we've kind of characterized that. And I feel that there's been, I feel that that's been kind of a salient way
Sure.
to describe the issue.
Yep, that makes sense. Again, Joe, it wasn't intended to do anything other than say there's more work to be done, but I hear.
That wasn't the intent.
Yeah.
I think that was the, I just think you've been hanging around the governor so long. Wordsmith.
So, Madam Chair, if there is no additional comments, I'm prepared to make the motion, subject to those two edits. And again, I want to double down on my efforts in highlighting Torres Martinez. I know, and I know that we initially on top, we do recognize them, but I also believe that whereas supporting our collaborative efforts and then being at the table would really provide some value in terms of our commitment to working with sovereign nation out here.
I'm
So
not gonna lie, I mean, it does always help to highlight the fact that we're here for federal funding.
so
I know what I'm doing here.
sorry. So with that being said, Madam Chairwoman or President or
President.
Princess?
Princess. Patrona, whatever.
Yeah, Queen. Yeah, Queen. All right.
Queen.
So
Feels
with
all
that being said, and I'm prepared to make a motion to consider adopting or to adopt this resolution as presented, subject to those two edits.
I'll second. Oh, good.
Okay, I'm gonna give it to Director
Huh?
Martha Cardenas Singh, sorry, as the second.
Don't put two Cardenas on there.
Oh, my goodness. Too late.
Yeah.
So the motion has been made to approve the Imperial Stream Salton Sea tributaries feasibility study with the two edits of adding the Torres Martinez tribe somewhere else in there, and then softening the SSMP remarks and adding in the 10-year plan. We have a roll call vote, please, Lisa?
President Dockstader.
Aye.
Director Morales.
Aye.
Director Aguilar.
yes,
Director Singh.
Yes.
Director Cardenas.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Moving on to state legislative matters, legislative task force.
Madam President, at the last board meeting, we discussed state legislative matters in some detail, the direction from the board to secure an advocate in Sacramento. We also talked about the possibility of a legislative task force, and I inquired amongst the board members of who would like to participate in that. And Director Singh indicated that she would, and it would be my recommendation, subject to the appointment of the chair and president, that the legislative task force consist of the president, the vice president, and Director Singh, with the authority of the task force limited to operating within the existing guidelines of the organization as a whole, and that matters of significance would be brought to the whole board for consideration.
I think that's a perfect idea. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any objections to those three being legislative task force? Do we need to vote on that, or I can
I
just
just
appoint?
appoint.
I appointed myself.
All right.
That's why you're the
And
queen.
Director
That's novel.
Castillo,
That's
who's
novel.
not here, he can't say no.
So with that behind us, we also, working with our member agencies, probed different resources that might be available to us for advocacy in Sacramento. We interviewed 3 separate agencies, and finally settled upon the Cruz strategies and Mr. Steve Cruz to represent us in Sacramento. And he's here with his team today, and I'd like for him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his organization.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Did I get the title right? For the president, was Your Highness in there? I didn't know if I got the
Even better.
Yeah.
Queen. Okay. I want to make sure I got that. I didn't want to start off on a bad foot. All right. But it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Steve Cruz, and I'm a partner at Cruz Strategies, and we're a lobbying firm in Sacramento. I'm joined by Nick Romo and Glenn Farrell. But the short version is I've been doing this for over 30 years now. I started with Hilda Solis when she was first elected to the state assembly. And then I worked for a guy named Willie Brown in San Francisco for about 6 years. And actually that's where I got a chance to meet Mr. Crowfoot in his days, going back to the City Hall in San Francisco. And so our firm, we're a contract lobbying firm, but we specialize in like local government, public agency, infrastructure, transportation, land use, environmental resources, and water. I actually worked with Glenn on behalf of the San Diego County Water Authority for about 10 years. That ended about maybe 5 years ago. But from that experience working with Glenn, we became roommates. And so he has his own firm, but he works out of our office. And so we partner on a lot of things. So we were really excited when Patrick reached out to really sort of put that, our experience back to work on these water issues, and specifically our experience on the Salton Sea related matters. All things Salton Sea and QSA and Colorado River. And so Glenn is really he really specializes in water, and I'll let him introduce himself, and also Nick. But Glenn, if you're on, I think I see your box in here. I'll kick it over to you. Or did he drop off? He dropped off, Nick. You're right. He did say to drop. So I'll kick it over to you, Nick.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Nick Romo with Cruz Strategies, one of the senior lobbyists on the team while working under Steve. And my background, about 12 years working in the state senate and working with cities and local governments across the state. My specialty, along with housing, transportation, and water under Steve, is local government finance. So all your budget discussions, the structures of those budgets, as well as state budget, is where I spend most of my time and energy. And so I'm happy to and excited to put that to work alongside of you.
So, Madam President, with the addition of the Cruz team and with Lisa in DC and supported by Lowry, Crook, and Best and Krieger on core matters, I think that we are locked and loaded for addressing these matters, both in DC and in Sacramento, to work in partnership with the state to accelerate progress at the city.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say to the Cruz team, thank you very much. We look forward to our partnership. It's great.
Madam Chair, I have some
Yeah.
comments.
Yes,
Thank
go right ahead.
So I would just kindly ask if I could encourage a homework assignment for the legislative task force, is that we come out with some guiding principles just in regards to all the agencies. And I know that Imperial Irrigation District, along with Coachella Valley Water District, are some heavy duty hydrology discussions now and negotiations, which I believe Intra-California and Lower Basin are going very, very well. However, I just want to make sure there are some guiding principles around hydrology, just to ensure that agencies are on the same page. I just don't know if that's feasible or even a worthy recommendation, but if we can come up with some guiding principles or a framework around that, that really memorializes the Salton Sea Authority's mission, I think it might be helpful. So we can find consensus among the agencies. I don't know if that's appropriate.
So what we have done is we've distributed key messages, and we actually have it in what we believe is proposed final form that I'll distribute to the board today. It's a living document, and what it's intended to do is on an issue by issue basis, demonstrate our collective understanding of different issues, history, opportunities and challenges around the sea. So regardless of what organization you're in, we're all saying the same thing. And if it's not right, it needs to be refined, reformed, so that we're all saying that same message. Like I said, I believe it's a living document. But if there's context that's missing from that, that doesn't address your concerns, Director Cardenas, then it should be in there.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Patrick, in regards to being a moving target. Obviously, hydrology is important, and there's really a lot at stake. But yeah, if there can be opportunities for us to maybe get a presentation, or maybe that's a future agenda topic to review, especially that we have new members, so that everybody can kind of get an orientation on.
We'll do that in June.
Okay, we can do that, and I think that would help and allow folks to chime in, and definitely we'll invite our government affair folks so they have DNA on it as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
So since the cruise team has come on board, we have been working with them and having conversations with our state partners to address, I'm assuming we're moving on to.
Yes, we are.
To address the Proposition 4 funding. As you recall, Proposition 4 was ultimately provided $170 million for the Salton Sea, 160 to the SSMP, and another 10 million, which was identified for either of the Salton Sea Authority and number 2 or 1 or 2. I don't know if the numbers are significant. I would argue that they're not. But I don't know which number they are. If we're number 1, then I would argue that they are. Or the Salton Sea Conservancy. We had been working with the state. We had suggested originally in the negotiation of the bond, there were 2 separate baskets of dollars. There was 40 million for the authority and 40 million for the conservancy. And then that was reduced to 10 million for the authority and 10 million for the conservancy. And at the end of the day, it was all lumped together in aggregate for both. We had proposed to the state a 50-50 split, some of that money to be used to work with the state in the implementation of the conservancy, some of that money to be used with the state in the outreach, engagement, and education associated with the feasibility study and other work, just a resource that's there for collaboration purposes. And then some of that money, about $1 million a piece, for the North Shore project and the Desert Shores project. It's not a substantial amount of money, but it's a little extra money to help those projects further advance. We subsequently, as a result of our discussions, revised that down to $3 million with the $1 million for the authority and $1 million for each for the projects. We did receive the governor's proposed budget, and it included $0 for the authority and $10 million for the conservancy. Steve and his team have been in an overdrive talking to people, trying to figure out what we want to do is the right thing, right? I think that's what everybody wants to do. I don't think that the state's intentions is acting with malice or disregard for the authority. And I know Joe will probably correct me on that, but we will. But what I'd like to do is I'd like Steve and his team to talk about where we've been, where we're at, and where we might be going in resolving this issue so that we can move forward.
Yeah, and first I'll start by thanking Joe for being there. And I've been doing this a long time. And when you're in the throes of like budget conversations, because it's a pretty short window from the May revise until June 15th, when the legislature is supposed to adopt a budget, and they've got thousands of issues to make decisions on, and they got a big budget deficit to try to manage. So, man, it's really a treat, and it's very gracious of Joe to show up. And if I'm being really honest, given what Patrick just described, that where we started in terms of what the May revise was and not getting an appropriation, for him to come there today, I think really sort of demonstrates, this is just one part of a lot of things that you do with the Salton Sea. But for him to come there and sort of provide, like in real time, like his response and what's happening is very, very gracious. And so, yes, as Patrick indicated, the target for, at least for now, is the Prop 4 allocation. And we've been working, to try to encourage some inclusion in that allocation. And we saw the May revise. And so what we just kind of keep coming back to try to be nimble and demonstrate, like, this is the role for the Salton Sea Authority historically. Like, let's make sure and recognize like their success and overseeing programs and projects and being a present between your member agencies in the region, and that we should have a role. So I think that's what we're just trying to figure out and continue to advocate for. And I know, Joe, you'll have a response to that, but part of our work is, part of the way the budget process works is the governor, it's his proposal, and the legislature obviously has a voice. So our job is to obviously communicate with legislators and budget chairs and subcommittee chairs, why we think we should have a role and a part in this. And so that's what we're doing. And again, we're trying to, I'd like to say, doing it in partnership with Joe, and then, trying to be cooperative in that relationship, and I'll keep an eye on the big picture as well. So I hope that helps, Joe, Patrick, if you need me to add more, or Nick to add more to it. But the one thing as a compliment to Nick and to Glenn, quickly able to, I could talk to people, that's my thing, and play my role. But Nick and Glenn are incredibly smart. I mean, within hours, we talk to Patrick, they'll have a PowerPoint, a matrix, a language, you name it. And so we're just well prepared and positioned to, tout the benefits of the Salton Sea Authority. And I'll say this and shut up, which is between last cycle and this cycle, the election, about 70% of legislators are new. And so, even though it's like, hey, we've been doing this a long time, we talk to people, it's like for a lot of folks, they're hearing this for the first time, and we met with Steve Bennett, who's the chair of the budget subcommittee that has a lot of say in this. And he's a super smart guy, Santa Barbara, but we're kind of educating him on the fly, and you got a couple of weeks to do it. So just to give you a sense of kind of the urgency, as sort of Patrick mentioned, that we're working under, but I think we're doing a good job. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, or if Nick wants to add anything.
I'll just add that we have in the short time we've been together, been testifying in budget committees, reaching out to the membership, putting this issue in front of everyone who needs to see it, everyone who will be at those final decision tables. So we have until a couple more weeks here until the next decision point, and we intend to keep at it. And so again, and I'll also express my gratitude to Joe for the discussions thus far, and for his willingness and his leadership in showing up today.
So I would go back to AB 71, which was passed in 2013, which said the Salton Sea Authority and the state shall work in collaboration, but they didn't provide any resources for the authority to collaborate with the state. We signed an MOU in 2020, and we did produce an agreement with the state for outreach and engagement but it was our first time at the dance, the first deal that we struck, and it was very complicated, and it was problematic in its implementation for a lot of reasons that candidly go both ways. And so that was a lesson learned that didn't produce value for us to do our work. And so when the Prop 4 came along and they had resources in there specifically for the authority, well, actually Prop 68, we had anticipated, and I inherited a budget that presumed that the authority would receive 5% of the Prop 68 funding for operational purposes. And the first budget that I had $250,000 in it that I did not get. I've been swimming upstream ever since, and thanks to my team and my support, we're in good financial position, notwithstanding that gaping hole. So we just believe that it's important that the work of the authority be recognized, valued, and supported so that we can realize the successes that we're capable of. And is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Is it 90-10? Whatever the number is, the resources that go to the authority are resources that benefit the state and that benefit the local community. And we just think that when the bond says authority and conservancy, with it landing at 0 for the authority is the wrong message and the wrong answer. So we'll continue to discuss this. I do have values in the budget that the board just approved that's reflective of what we think we can get from the bond or elsewhere, because we're not going to give up on finding resources, even if we have to have a garage sale. We're going to find the money necessary to do the work that we do. Our budget is not contingent on receiving either the partner contribution or the stakeholder contribution. We still have a positively cash flowing budget. But that, I think that just provides the board a sense of what we're doing, and we'll continue to work on it. And with that long-winded soliloquy, I'll invite Joe to to provide some, because we talk pretty regularly on this, and I do appreciate his collaboration on this. It's important and it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And thanks to Steve and his team. Steve's a really good guy. And he's a really good advocate for all of his folks, but SSA in particular. I think we've had a really good relationship and kind of an open line of communication trying to problem solve here. I would just say off the top, and some of you have heard me say this before, when it comes to the Salton Sea, there's really no shortage of work that needs to get done, right? There's a lot we need to do, and the real question is who does what and how do we pay for it? I can understand that for this group, reacting to the proposal that we put forward from the administration I could understand if the reaction was disappointment. I would completely understand that. I would say, this is really not a reflection of anything to do with the authority, really. It's a reflection of, one, a statutory responsibility to implement a law that was passed last year, and two, the difficult budget situation we find ourselves in. So, taking number one first, SB 583 was passed last year, creating a conservancy, being very clear that the general fund is not meant to support this conservancy. It's meant to be supported by bond funds and special funds. So there's that. Then it says that by January of 2026, the conservancy, quote unquote, is to be established. So that's not a lot of time for implementation. You've got to find funding to stand this thing up, and it's an ongoing funding source that is needed to fund these ongoing positions. And on top of that, this conservancy is meant to operate and maintain the multi-$100 million projects that our state team is building. So there's a lot riding on the responsibility of this conservancy, both from just a practical matter from the regional perspective, and I would say from a legal perspective, and just the law dictating what the conservancy is to do. So we've really taken a crash course in trying to understand what do we have to do to stand this thing up really in less than a year. And as we looked at kind of the costs of trying to stand up this conservancy, make sure that it's in a position to be successful, we took a rather kind of blind approach to the money and spent time talking to conservancies, looking at kind of the staff to acreage ratios of other conservancies that manage lots of land, which you'll see reflected, I think, on page 8 of our budget proposal. And we came up with an initial staffing plan that we thought would get this conservancy off the ground and to be, a bona fide value add. Next, we took a look at the budget picture and viable funding sources to try to stand this thing up really immediately, because that's what we have to do. So that's where, the Proposition 4 funding was the only, bond fund source that we identified that could support the creation of this conservancy in its infancy, given the language in the conservancy bill not to use general fund, and just beyond that, the state of the general fund. I'm sure folks saw the budget presentation last week. This is really a challenging time for our state. So that's where, we identified what we did. The conservancy bill also talks about the Salton Sea Lithium Fund as a long-term funding source, and we talked to some smart people at the Department of Finance's Economic Projections Unit and kind of cross-referenced that with the Energy Commission, and projecting that 4-ish, 5-ish years out, the Salton Sea Lithium Fund likely will be able to sustain the operating budget of the conservancy for the long term, but that leaves a gap in the middle. And what you're seeing in our proposal is really just a process of elimination available funding sources to support the Salton Sea Conservancy until we get there. Final point, if you just take a look around this table, this area, we understand that there's a lot that goes into running these entities that serve the benefit of the region. Now, for the folks in the room, look over to the other side of the room that we're in today. That's where the Salton Sea Conservancy is starting from. Absolutely nothing. And we've got to stand them up in 6 months if we get this approved through the legislature. We've got a lot of work to do. I think our proposal is very responsible in how we, are trying to do it. And I recognize that, again, it's disappointing to react to, for the authority but the very last thing I'll say is the authority's priorities are our priorities, full stop, at the state. Desert Shores, North Lake pilot, the feasibility study, improving our community outreach and engagement. Those are all things that are critically important to us. We've got, state staff that are committed to this as well. I'm relatively new to this role. I want to take a fresh look at how we can, improve our partnership and continue to advance our shared priorities together. And certainly to the extent there are things that we can identify as advocacy priorities going forward, I'm fully supportive of doing that. And I want to do that. I view this as a different, a piece of kind of different timelines here, where we've got this statutory mandate to stand up the Conservancy in less than a year. We've got, this important partnership that I want to work on together. And to the extent there are gaps and things that need to be, trued up in the coming months or years, let's partner on advancing those on a different track so that we're all kind of benefiting the region and doing this work together.
So I really appreciate the detail you went through in developing that approach. A couple things that I would say is Prop 4 says the money is for the creation of the Conservancy, and I think that using it for operations may not be appropriate. That's my point of discussion. I would also offer that $10 million is not enough under any circumstance anyway. So you're starting with not enough money. And by not properly resourcing the authority, it limits our ability to work with the state to find that continuing stream of resources. Owens Lake is $75 million a year in O&M. This is going to be of multiples of that, and we're going to have to figure that out. I don't think, my last comment would be, I don't think it's the state's intention, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, to divest itself of the liability created by the QSA to maintain these improvements. So at some level, the state's going to have to continue to address whatever shortfall that the Conservancy has anyway. And so all I'm saying, and I think all we're saying, is we need to work together. We need to be properly stood up and healthy in order to do that. And I think that there should be enough resources within that $10 million to get us to the next step along this journey. So, and I don't think we're going to solve anything today, but I think it's a very healthy and appropriate public discussion to have, and I appreciate you engaging in it.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
So I think well said on both parts here. My only question is that at what point do we start proposing some counter proposals in regards to the 3 million? Again, the fact that you guys laid out a proposed allocation of funding, Salton Sea funding related to Prop 4, and you laid out 6 items there that are all worthy projects, but just trying to get some context and color in terms of which ones do have priority. So I think, we're asking for 3 million, but if they come back with 1.5 or 2 million, or maybe they come back for the whole 3, but if they do come back short of the 3 million, which of these 6 are we going to prioritize, whether it's the supplemental funding for North Lake demonstration project or the completion of the Desert Shores channel restoration project? So could I maybe get some feedback on priority in the event that we do fall short of the 3 million and they come back and they say, hey, which ones have priority? What would our response be?
So that is our amended matrix after speaking with budget staff, and we started at 5 million, so we're at 3 million, and the discussions are continuing. I think that there's never going to be enough money for anybody.
Yeah.
So the priority to me, and I think the priority to the region, needs to be and to the state. I think this is our collective priority. The feasibility study has to stay on the track has to bring the community along, has to get to the finish line in a way that everybody understands what we did, why we did it, and what we're pursuing. Because beyond the chief's report in 4 or 5-ish years, we're going to need to continue to advocate for the resources to build this stuff out. So the state is doing its work on the 10-year plan. We need to keep doing our work in DC and in Sacramento to make sure that the feasibility study doesn't go sideways. It's a super complicated project. It's not conventional ecosystem that the Corps is used to swimming in. So it's going to be easy for people to get distracted or discouraged, and it's going to take some effort. And that's why we brought CV Strategies on board to start building the foundation of communications infrastructure so that we can bring the community along with this effort, so that when it was finished, we knew what we got. And I think it's going to be critical for everything that's going on in the region and throughout the basin. And I just think so there's some resources there, and that's the top line budget. I also think that dealing with the community centric issues beyond Desert Shores and North Shore, I think that, there would be some in the community who would say, 9,000 acres at SCH is great, but I can't see it, right? And so from where they're living, they don't see anything happening. So having some resources that, whether they're planning dollars or otherwise, to work with our local stakeholders to suss out the specific community-centric needs, I think is also something that the state would benefit from a public engagement standpoint. Right now we're at 0, so anything more than 0 is money to work with, and we just have to figure out. This board will decide when they land at the number, Director Cardenas, then this board will decide how to best utilize those numbers. But from my standpoint as the executive director of the authority, those are some of the priorities that I think some additional resources will help us serve this board, its member agencies, and the community.
But can I just, one clarifying point I want to make, when I say that the authority's priorities are also our priorities. So talking about the Army Corps feasibility study, right? Our budget proposal for this year for our program includes $11.5 million for the feasibility study. And we're not just kicking in for the feasibility study at the Army Corps, we're kicking in an extra amount so that the staff at the Army Corps prioritize our proposal, against all the other things that they're working on. It's at their highest tier of prioritization. That's the state's commitment to advancing the feasibility study, right? On the North Lake pilot project, we are bringing in experts from across the Department of Water Resources, not just in the Salton Sea Management Program, across the department, who are very sophisticated in building these really critical components of infrastructure across the state that have some of the challenges that we see kind of building these projects at the sea. So this is like, we're bringing in institutional knowledge that's really invaluable in terms of being able to figure out how to, navigate the challenges that we face with getting that project done. And then on Desert Shores, we also have, senior project managers from our team who are tracking that project extremely closely and trying to, figure out a way to advance it. So, I appreciate the authority's proposals on this front, the amounts of money, countering kind of what we've proposed. I would just say, though, that in order to get these projects built, like actually built, it's going to take a heck of a lot more money than $1 million here and there. And that's what we're focused on, is driving towards a concept that that we can get to the project funding stage. And I think we can do that with our existing resources. So I just want to be clear about when I say our priorities are the authority's priorities. We're kicking in our resources to show that, and we're also bringing to bear the expertise of our team to get these projects done.
And I would say that the state's priorities are our priorities, because the Desert Shores project and the North Lake project are SSMP projects, and the funding for the North Lake project was part of Prop 68, which the authority worked very diligently to pursue, securing $220 million for SCH for the North Lake project and for the New River project down in Calexico that they're having a ribbon cutting in 3 minutes.
We're late.
But the last thing I'll say is, and I think it's important, and again, we're not going to solve it at this table today. The last thing I'll say is, particularly with respect to the work that we do, and I think it's important for the state and the authority to work together to create an outreach and engagement plan that makes sense. To the extent that we have resources associated with that, some or all of those resources will be creditable to the state as part of the agreement with the Corps of Engineers. So the state could in fact advance money for that purpose, and it would just be an offset to the money that they're approving for the core work. So it could fall out of that basket also. It's just hashing all this stuff out,
Yeah,
and it's fussy.
And if I just say, and I'll try to be quiet right after this, but I think what Joe's saying, I do appreciate, and what I do appreciate the most about this conversation is that Cruise Strategies is listening and we have an engagement with them. But for me, what I just need to know where the lines are drawn in terms of supplanting versus supplementing, so that when our ask is made, that it's very, very clear where the earmarks and the appropriations are going to go. So I think Joe said a mouthful in terms of the commitment from the state. However, we just need to make sure that our asks are aligned in the supplementing area of the Salton Sea as opposed to supplanting. Those are my final comments.
And there's no action on this item.
Right.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Do we have any other pending state
Madam
legislation?
President, I do recall seeing Director Aguilar's hand up earlier. I don't know if we blew right by him. It may have even been on an earlier item, but
Actually, yeah, it was on the earlier item on the operating budget discussion. My questions were answered for the most part, but I did want to make just one comment on this current discussion, which is particularly with Cruise Strategies being on the line. When they're having their discussions with the legislators, from my own experience, the legislators, they need to have something very specific to respond to.
Right.
And so frankly, I mean, this conversation is kind of floating all sorts of different directions. And so I'm assuming that when we're talking to those folks, that we have something specific in terms of a task or an action item that we're asking them to respond to or to set aside an allocation for. Because if you do not, then we lose them. And that's not anything that any one of you probably don't already realize that. But I find it a little bit, I guess, frustrating that, we're talking 10 million, then it's 7.6, now it's 3, and that's fine. I realize even that's not enough money, but I am concerned that, I guess, Patrick, I'm directing these comments to you more specifically, that we give something to those folks who are in the decision-making position to react to very, very succinctly. And that's my only comment.
noted.
And Patrick, did you want me to respond at all to the director's comments? Okay.
Please.
Yeah, no, and we've actually really, just as a practice, we, as a firm, we try to do that. And we always sort of walk in and say, well, what are we trying to accomplish from this meeting? So we actually have, and this is why it's unusual because Joe's in the room, but it's also unusual because we're very transparent with him. We've said, hey, Joe, at least for this item in the Conservancy, this is what we're asking for, and this is what we're going to legislators to ask for. So we've given them specific language, we've given them a dollar amount, and we're working the process, on the legislative side, and hopefully, obviously, in letting Joe know what we're doing. But we do have a specific ask in that regard. And then I think I just heard Joe say, if there's not sufficient funds in the Conservancy, we're going to give you $10 million to this other fund. Just kidding, Joe. No, but
No, I heard that too.
No, but I think, we're new to it, but in working with Patrick too, we understand the budget situation. But part of what we're doing with the language is to make sure that there's some recognition of our work. The fact that Joe's there today says a lot. And I think it's just continuing to make sure that the public and your constituents and your member agencies that they know that we do have that close relationship with Joe, and then maybe it comes through and through some of the other programs you mentioned, the feasibility, the funding set aside there. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question, but we do have a
Yeah, it does.
specific
Yeah,
ask we go on each.
thank you for that. I appreciate that. And thank you, President, for letting me speak.
Always a pleasure, always. So are we on to pending?
I just wanted to put a placeholder in there in
Okay.
case there was anything. I
Like-
know that Steve and his team have been up to their elbows, if you will, in Prop 4, but to the extent that there are other things going on in Sacramento that affect the Salton Sea or the region that you wanted to share, just to provide an opportunity to do that.
So I think that was directed to you, Mr. Cruz.
I think it could be
If there's anything you want
Steve
to,
or Nick.
okay. Oh, good, nothing's going
I'm sorry,
on.
I lost the audio there for a second. I'm sorry, Patrick. Can you say that one more time? I apologize.
I said it so well the first time.
I'm sorry.
I said, it's really just a placeholder item, and I know that you guys have been busy with the Prop 4 discussion and the work you're doing on that. But if there was anything else going on that related to the Salton Sea or region that you wanted to bring up, I just wanted to create a placeholder opportunity for you to share it with the board. Not necessarily, but I just wanted to put something on there to give you a chance to share if there was anything that we should be paying attention to that.
Yeah, there were a couple of bills I think that have been introduced, but none that we've actually taken a position on. And I know Glenn was on to sort of mention the two, but I don't know if Nick, if you had them in front of you, but they weren't. I don't think they were. They had an impact strong enough where we were actually going to take a position, but more just monitoring. Do you know the two bills offhand, Nick?
Yeah, there's two Padilla bills related to kind of economic development in the Salton Sea. We'll transmit both of those to the board in a summary. Patrick will send you a detailed summary of what those bills do. But I did want to highlight for you the state's current discussions around cap and trade that does have impacts to expenditures to the state's sort of suite of climate programs, some of which do impact the Salton Sea, whether directly or indirectly. The legislature and the governor have signaled their interest in extending the cap and trade program beyond 2030. And you might have heard in the news that the federal government and the current administration has directed some comments and potential threats against that program. So there's now a rush to kind of a reauthorization of the program at the state level. And so with the governor's plan has come out last week with the May revision, the question remains is how much funding will be available for the suite of programs that are currently funded under the cap and trade greenhouse gas reduction fund. And so we will transmit to you a briefing on what those impacts may be. Those conversations are expected to go through the fall. It certainly will have long-term sort of ramifications as to where the legislature lands and how they're allocating this funding. The current idea is that the current program would be extended until 2045. So we will live with the regime that the legislature and governor negotiate for the next 15 years or so. So we certainly want to watch that closely. Those conversations are ongoing, and I know Joe and others have also been partners engaging on that conversation. So we will also transmit to you a briefing on those discussions, and at your next board meeting, happy to discuss further.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Moving on to project activity, North Lake Demonstration Project.
Madam President, at our last board meeting, we approved an extension of the Prop 68 grant with DWR. And as you know, Riverside County acts as the implementing agency on this project, and we had a separate agreement, a companion agreement to the bond that facilitated their acting as the implementing agency. And all this is a mirror image of the extension. It extends the implementing agreement with the county. It's been reviewed by council. It's included in your packet, and it's recommended for your approval.
Is there any discussion? You're good to go. I'll entertain a motion if someone wants to make it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Motion to approve. Can I get a second?
I'll go ahead and second that, Madam Chair.
Okay. I have a motion to approve to ratify the extension amendment to Authority Rivco agreement for the North Lake Pilot Demonstration Project. That was made by Director Morales, and that was seconded by Director Cardenas. Can you take a roll call vote, please, Lisa?
President Dockstader,
Aye.
Director Morales,
Aye.
Director Aguilar,
Yes,
Director Singh,
Yes.
Director Cardenas.
Yes,
Motion passed.
Thank you. Moving on to Desert Shores.
President, Nicholas Engineering, who we hired to do some geotechnical and hydrologic work on the project is rapidly advancing their work, and I in no small part due to the partnership and assistance of the community who has helped us access parcels, ComCept, and in particular, who has been working with the project team to coordinate the community engagement on that, who is here with us today. Thanks for being here, Tom.
Carly, yes.
And Carlene Ness, who is a longtime resident of Desert Shores, who controls everything. She's great.
President of the
You know how that goes. And so we're hopeful in the next couple of months to have some detailed technical information that will inform the design of the project. The grant, we knew earlier on the grant was not going to be sufficient for the completion of the project because we had assumed that we were going to be able to rely on some well data. The design portion of the grant is insufficient, and we're working right now with the Bureau to reallocate the funds in that grant so that a larger portion of it will go to the design component, and which will inform the ultimate project cost. And once we know that, we'll figure out where in Joe's budget we're going to get the rest of the money to fund this project.
yeah.
But I expect to bring that back to the next board meeting, the modification and extension of the Bureau grant. So I just wanted to update the board on that. So I wanted to say.
And want to thank the Salton Sea Authority for being so actively engaged in this project forward. Community has been working on this and hoping for this for over 8 years. And people are thrilled to see movement on the ground. And yes, as Patrick mentioned, was necessary to drill a well instead of a test well, instead of just rely on data, but good water was found. And we don't know exactly how much we'll get, but we know the quality is fine and the quantity is significant, because when the high permeability sections of the ground were pierced, it started flowing pretty quickly. So we will get significant water, and we will get good water. And we will find out from the completion of analysis how much. And then the other piece is how much lining will we need to do to prevent loss of water through the areas of bank that are sandy soil. And we hope to have good answers on that, and we hope to find a cost-effective way to complete this project and restore value to the community, restore 25 acres of habitat for fish and birds, and to eliminate quarry of dust.
And I would like to point out, I was pleasantly surprised. Somebody used their brain and put the well above the Salton Sea. So elevation wise, it will flow downhill. Very good, very good.
Through county right too.
Mhm.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that GAFCON has done in advancing this effort, and
Yes.
working with the community. Paul Nahar and Jaisel Mendoza have been particularly engaged in this, and it's been a demonstration project that we can truly learn from and replicate.
Thank you. Look forward to progress on that front at our next meeting. Moving on to reports, federal. Does Lisa have more for us?
The only things I would add is there are 2 nominations moving through the Senate. The Army Corps of Engineers nominee, I don't know actually how you pronounce it, Telly or Teal. He is a Senate Chief of Staff or a Republican member. That was before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. It's waiting a vote of that committee to move on to full Senate consideration. And then Andrea Again, Travnik is the will be the Assistant Secretary for Water and Science. She now sits on the Senate calendar waiting for Senate consideration. So that would be your Colorado River kind of lead political over that, the job that Tanya Trujillo had. So both of those moving through, we did talk to both of our Senate offices about those nominations. Just they have meetings typically with pending nominees, and to just ask them to mention the Salton Sea to both of the nominees as they come through as an important thing for those senators, particularly for the Corps of Engineers nominee, just to highlight the feasibility study and its importance. Senator Padilla serves on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and so we talked to them before that hearing. I guess maybe now a week ago or so. So certainly be helpful to both of, all of the issues that come before the C to have those people, in place within the administration. There's a lot of rumors that the Bureau of Reclamation person is coming soon. So, stay tuned on that. That nominee will go to the Senate Energy Committee, and both our senators are on, or both of them? No, Padilla is on that committee. So that's another opportunity for, each individual member agency to kind of work with that Senate office to ask questions and to be engaged in that. It tends to be Colorado River, so we don't tend to engage in that piece of things, but just so that's coming, and that's something that IID can do and CVWD can do, just working with Padilla's office to get some engagement on your
And when you say soon, Lisa, do you mean like in 2 weeks soon? What's your soon to you?
The rumors are that it's coming relatively soon, but you will have time kind of in between when you read a press report that the president has nominated someone. Once that happens, what happens in the Senate, those paperwork gets sent to the Senate Energy Committee. That nominee then needs to fill out a whole bunch of Senate Energy Committee questionnaires. So there'll be, even when you see it announced, it would be, which may be in the next, week or 2 weeks, then the process of the Senate, which is actually faster than it used to be, but it will take the committee a little bit of time to work with the nominee to get the paperwork that the Senate requires in. And then you have a hearing, you need a hearing scheduled, markup scheduled, and then floor consideration. So, you could still be looking at, hopefully in the summer, right?
Yeah.
That the person would
Right.
actually move through the process. It used to be that you could actually like filibuster nominees. That rule has changed, so they do move a little bit faster. I mean, Andrea, I think, will be put in place relatively quickly, just because she's got a lot of support, and I think people feel pretty comfortable with her. So at least you will, from a Colorado River perspective, you will have a pretty high level person there to help with those. Again, not something I'm working on, but something I know you guys are working on. That should be in place relatively quickly. The other part will take a little bit more time, just for the committee process to kind of work its way, through. But if you end up having any questions about nominees, I handle nominations in the Senate for many, many years. So, something that
I nominate Alex.
No.
yeah, well, it takes, yeah.
No.
It's an interesting it's an interesting process, but I think Andrea will land relatively quickly. What they'll do on the Senate floor is package up a group of nominees and try to move them by unanimous consent. And if you can do that, and you don't have to require a vote because someone's not controversial, they tend to move forward relatively quickly. And hopefully she would fall in that type of consent kind of situation. When you have to call a vote, then it just, believe it or not, that whole process just kind of takes up a lot of Senate time, and that can delay things for someone. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just, my wannabe lawyer hat is sticking up. Just on the resolution, I know we already took action on that. On the 5th paragraph from the bottom, though, it says, our restoration milestones are 14,200 acres of projects with at least half of this acreage to provide habitat benefits. It's 29,800 acres with half of that providing habitat benefits.
I think it was through the current period. That was the intent, but if that's not, that was through the current 14,000 through 2024. I think that was
Oh.
Yeah, that's how we wrote it through, unless that dropped out somewhere with when Tina edited it, but that it was supposed to be like through, I think it says through 2024 still. So that was why it was the lower number.
No, I mean,
It should.
Oh, okay, I see, sorry,
But if
sorry.
there's any lack of clarity there, that should be cleaned up.
Okay, yeah, I would just double check.
Yeah, that was just through the
Through
20.
24, yeah, it wasn't the full, yeah, number.
Okay, moving on to state. Do we need to hear any more from Cruise Strategies? Or they're off? I mean, we kind of already covered everything, I think.
Can I say?
Yeah.
another thing? So,
I'm sorry.
other folks heard this on the bus yesterday, but we, yesterday were approved by the Wildlife Conservation Board for a $5.3 million grant that is going to assist in the construction of our Audubon Bombay Wetlands project. This is a really important project to us, particularly because of the partnership with Audubon, and it's utilizing an existing water source on the east side of the sea. Maybe one thing that's a little bit interesting is that this actually started out as a project from Audubon, and over the course of our conversations with them and just trying to help their project along, we recognize that we might be able to utilize some of our state expertise in building projects and contracting and getting capital projects built to help kind of shepherd this through the WCD process and then through the construction process. So literally my first day on this job was December 3rd. We were kind of talking about this and then, realized we might be able to make the May board meeting timeline. So, we connected with Audubon like 2 days later. We had a meeting with IID like 2 days after that. They've been super helpful and responsive in getting our easements for this project. Went before the board. Thank you to Chairwoman Doc Stater and Director Cardenas for their support, approving this easement back in March. And that set us on the trajectory to meet this timeline in May. So just long story short, I feel like this is a testament to what we can do when we partner together and we, try to meet these really ambitious deadlines. And we also try to draw in, additional dollars that are competitive. So we're competing against other folks, but in this context, I think shows that we can be successful when we work together. So it's hopefully a good story for the sea and more that we get something that we'll see more of.
And I believe we're also trying to expedite and even provide more efficiency when it comes to your project and road easements out there. So more to come there.
Yeah.
Can I share something that I heard on the bus too?
I'd love to hear it. What'd you hear on the bus? We're on the short bus?
Yeah, no, I was in the short bus. So I was in the short bus and so I spent quite a bit of time at the sea, but on the bus, I heard from Miss Jasmine Phillips that she saw a brown pelican about 2 to 3 weeks ago. And I'm always constantly out there looking for them and I can't find them. But Miss Jasmine said that she saw a brown pelican.
That's awesome.
Was it about 2 or 3 weeks ago, or unfortunately she didn't have her camera, but I'm dying to see one and I haven't seen one in a long time.
I saw one about maybe 4 weeks ago flying over the southeast edge of the Salton Sea. So they're not gone, they're just few and far between.
Awesome.
They're like Bigfoot.
That's fabulous. Moving on to your report, Patrick?
The only thing I would add, Madam President, is we have been working with CV Strategies on the development of the communications program. And as I mentioned, those key messages are in what we believe final form. I will distribute those to the board today and they will be available on our meeting website by this afternoon. The only other thing I wanted to say is I want to thank the Cambria Imperial Hotel for allowing us to use this facility. It was a relatively short notice that we received and having to reschedule this meeting from yesterday. And we MacGyvered it. I had to explain to the young lady here what MacGyvering it meant. But we were able to pull this together with duct tape and chicken wire. And I think we're making it to the finish line without a hitch.
And
So-
thank you, everybody, for coming today, letting us have a quorum, just because it was a little bit last minute and so we could, attend the function yesterday at Salton Sea. That was very important that we did that. So
Absolutely.
thanks to everybody. Appreciate it. All right. At this point in time, meeting's adjourned, 10:22.
Let's get a picture with Miss.